The geopolitical laws of the Middle East. Why history has repeated itself for 3,000 years. For 3,000 years, empires have risen and fallen, yet time and again they have returned to the very same frontiers, proving that geography has outlived rulers, armies, and civilizations alike. The Persian armies were the first to turn these lands into the strategic bridge between the East and the Mediterranean. Centuries later, Alexander the Great marched along the very same roads, changing only the name of the empire. The Romans followed the same route, proving that geography outlives even the greatest of empires. For centuries, Byzantium and the Sasanian Empire fought over the same roads, cities, and fertile river valleys. The Arab armies followed the same routes once used by Roman and Persian legions, reshaping the balance of power forever. Later, the Seljuks advanced through the same corridors, reshaping Anatolia as geography and trade routes endured. The Ottomans inherited these ancient routes and transformed them into the foundation of a vast world empire. The British Empire arrived not in pursuit of history, but to secure the very same routes, straits, and trade arteries. Today, states rely on satellites and drones, yet they continue to compete for the very same strategic spaces. Religions, technologies, and empires have changed, yet geography has repeatedly guided history back to the same path. To understand the region's future, we must first recognize the laws that have shaped its history for millennia and still guide us. What are the laws of geopolitics? History changes rulers, dynasties, and empires, yet it repeatedly brings states back to the very same strategic frontiers, where geography continues to shape political decisions, military campaigns, and the balance of power across generations. For centuries, Egypt fortified the Sinai, knowing that the gravest threat to its security and survival would almost always come from the east. Persian kings repeatedly sought to control Mesopotamia, the gateway to the wealth and influence of the Western lands. Roman legions once again reached the Euphrates, advancing along the very route their rivals had taken before them in earlier campaigns. For centuries, Byzantium and the Sasanian Empire fought over Syria and Mesopotamia, finding no alternative path to victory. The Arab armies swiftly captured those same lands because they united the region's roads, cities, and trade networks. The Ottomans once again united the Straits, the Balkans, and the Levant into a single strategic system of power, controlling the vital crossroads of trade, diplomacy, and military expansion across 3 continents. By the beginning of the 20th century, those same frontiers had once again become the arena of great power rivalry. Today, states employ new technologies, yet they continue to compete for the same straits, valleys, and strategic crossroads. History changes its actors, but the direction of their decisions is shaped time and again by the same geography. That is why similar events continue to unfold, even though the eras, ideologies, and armies have long since changed. The laws of geopolitics do not predict the future, but they explain why history so often follows familiar paths. Geography is stronger than ideology. In the 6th century BC, the Persian Empire subjugated Babylon, the Levant, and Asia Minor. It seemed to have forever changed the region, but its power lay not in ideology or religion, but in its control over a space that connected a third of the world. 2 centuries later, Alexander the Great crushed Persia, but the roads, cities, and importance of Mesopotamia remained the same. After the Arab conquests of the 7th century, a new religion changed the map of the region, but the trade routes and valleys retained their strategic importance. History confirms once again that states, armies, and ideologies change, but geography maintains the region's global significance. After the collapse of Rome, Byzantium and the Arab states again fought for Syria, the Levant, and northern Mesopotamia. Several centuries later, the Ottoman Empire and Safavid Iran again fought over eastern Anatolia, the South Caucasus, and Mesopotamia. Even in the 20th and 21st centuries, ideological differences between the region's states remain profound, but the main lines of rivalry continue to run through the Strait of Hormuz, the Levant, the eastern Mediterranean, the South Caucasus, and the Tigris and Euphrates. History shows that ideologies change states, but ultimately they are forced to submit to the logic of geography: rivers, mountains, seas, and routes. The Cold War changed alliances, but not geography. The struggle once again unfolded over Suez, the Levant, the Persian Gulf, and the Caucasus. Empires have disappeared, religions have changed, ideologies have succeeded one another. But the Bosphorus, Mesopotamia, Suez, and Hormuz have retained their significance for centuries. The history of the region shows that political ideas change states, but not the location of rivers, seas, straits, and mountain passes at all. The first law of geopolitics is simple: ideologies shape the goals of states, but geography determines the limits of their implementation. Why empires always return. In 539 BC, Cyrus the Great captured Babylon. With the city came Mesopotamia, the Levant, and the routes to the Mediterranean, securing a strategic core that countless later empires would strive to dominate and build upon ever. After Alexander's death, his empire collapsed. Yet the struggle for Syria, Egypt, and Mesopotamia began almost immediately. Later, Rome and Parthia once again clashed over Syria, Armenia, and Mesopotamia, the same lands that had shaped the regional balance of power for centuries. Empires disappeared, but the importance of key territories endured. New powers therefore returned to the very same strategic objectives. For centuries, Byzantium and the Sasanian Empire fought over Syria, Armenia, and Mesopotamia, repeating the geopolitical struggles of earlier empires. The Arab Caliphate replaced the old powers, yet the contest for the Levant, Egypt, and Mesopotamia continued under new rulers. The Ottoman Empire and Safavid Iran once again divided eastern Anatolia, the South Caucasus, and Mesopotamia into rival spheres of influence. Armies, rulers, and eras changed, but the principal strategic frontiers remained remarkably familiar. What returns is not the empire itself. What returns is the enduring desire to control the same strategic regions. Empires vanished, yet great powers again converged on the eastern Mediterranean, Levant, Persian Gulf, and South Caucasus. States change, but the struggle for the world's most important trade routes and strategic crossroads continues again and again. History shows that while empires disappear, the strategic importance of key regions survives the passing of eras, states, and civilizations. The second law of geopolitics is simple: it is not empires that return, but the persistent ambition of states to control the same strategic spaces. How trade creates wars. The Phoenician city of Tyre grew wealthy through maritime trade, connecting distant ports with valuable goods, skilled merchants, and expanding influence. It was precisely that prosperity that made the city a coveted prize for the greatest conquerors of the ancient world. Alexander the Great laid siege to Tyre in order to deprive Persia of its principal naval stronghold in the eastern Mediterranean. Later, Rome sought to control Egypt, for the grain of the Nile fed millions of people throughout the empire. History demonstrates that prosperous commercial centers rarely remain beyond the reach of great power rivalry. The Crusades were not fought solely for holy places. Venice also sought to strengthen its commercial position in the East. After the conquest of Constantinople in 1453, the Ottomans gained control over the principal trade routes linking Europe and Asia. The search for a sea route to India transformed world history. European powers sought to bypass the trade routes controlled by the Ottoman Empire, gaining direct access to the riches of the East and reshaping global commerce, exploration, and imperial rivalry. Every new trade route enriched some states while becoming a lasting source of rivalry, strategic competition, and conflict for others across entire regions. The opening of the Suez Canal once again made the Middle East one of the world's most important crossroads of international trade. Today, the Straits of Hormuz and Bab el-Mandeb remain vital gateways through which a significant share of global trade continues to pass. Where the world's principal trade routes converge, the interests of regional and global powers inevitably collide. The third law of geopolitics is simple: control over trade routes brings wealth, influence, and almost inevitably becomes a source of strategic rivalry. How religion becomes an instrument of politics. In AD 313, Constantine issued the Edict of Milan, legalizing Christianity and ending centuries of imperial persecution. The new faith gradually evolved into one of the central pillars of political legitimacy, social cohesion, and imperial unity across the Roman Empire. 3 centuries later, Islam united the Arab tribes, becoming the foundation of a new state on the Arabian Peninsula. The new faith helped unite the tribes and create a political order capable of expanding far beyond Arabia. History shows that faith has often served as a powerful foundation for political unity and long-term state stability across eras. Byzantine emperors convened ecumenical councils, strengthening the unity of the empire through religious unity. Ottoman sultans adopted the title of caliph, extending their political influence far beyond the borders of their empire. The Ottomans and the Safavids used religion to legitimize their long struggle for control of Anatolia, the Caucasus, and Mesopotamia, where strategic frontiers, trade routes, and imperial influence shaped the balance of power for centuries. History demonstrates that faith often reinforced political authority, yet it was rarely the sole cause of conflict or warfare alone. Even today, states use religion to strengthen their influence both within their borders and far beyond them, shaping alliances still. Yet political decisions are shaped not only by faith, but also by security, economic interests, geographic realities, and strategy. History teaches that religion strengthens politics, but it rarely becomes the only force guiding state decisions. The 4th law of geopolitics is simple. Religion reinforces politics, but it rarely replaces geography or the enduring interests of the state. Buffer states and why they rarely survive. For centuries, Armenia stood between Rome and Parthia, becoming the battleground of their enduring rivalry. Caught between 2 great empires, its kings, fortresses, and mountain passes repeatedly became the focus of diplomacy, invasion, and war. Judea repeatedly became the arena where the great powers competing for the eastern Mediterranean confronted one another. The Nabatean kingdom flourished between powerful neighbors as long as the regional balance of power endured. When that balance collapsed, buffer states became the first to absorb the shockwaves of imperial conflict between rival empires. Medieval Armenia once again found itself caught between Byzantium and the rising Muslim powers of the east. The Kingdom of Georgia grew stronger as neighboring empires gradually weakened after decades of exhausting internal struggles. Later, the Caucasus again became the frontier between the Ottoman Empire and Safavid Iran, where mountain passes, powerful fortresses, and vital trade routes turned the region into a battleground for centuries of imperial rivalry, influence, and strategic control. Buffer states endured longest when neighboring great powers maintained a stable regional balance of power between them over time. Even today, the Levant, Syria, and the South Caucasus remain regions where the strategic interests of many powers continue to converge. Every shift in the balance of power increases pressure on states caught between competing regional and global rivals seeking dominance. History demonstrates that living between great powers has rarely guaranteed either lasting security or independence for neighbors. The 5th law of geopolitics is simple. Buffer states endure only while great powers preserve their strategic balance over time. Maritime Straits as a geopolitical weapon. The Persian kings sought to control the Hellespont, the narrow strait linking Asia with Europe and connecting the Aegean Sea to the Sea of Marmara. Whoever dominated this vital crossing gained strategic access to trade, military movement, and imperial expansion. Athens understood that the freedom of commerce depended on controlling the sea routes through the Aegean and its straits. Later, Byzantium transformed the Bosporus into both the shield protecting its capital and the strategic foundation of imperial power. Whoever controlled the strait could shape trade, security, and the fate of neighboring states for centuries to come and regional power. The Ottomans seized the Bosporus and the Dardanelles, turning both straits into the cornerstone of their imperial security. For centuries, Russian rulers sought secure access from the Black Sea through the strategic Turkish straits to reach the Mediterranean. In 1915, the Dardanelles once again shaped the course of a global conflict long before Constantinople itself could be threatened. Control of the narrow strait determined naval strategy, supply routes, and the balance of power across the eastern Mediterranean. Control of the Straits brought not only wealth, but also the power to shape wars, peace, and the fate of entire regions. Today, Suez, Hormuz, and Bab el-Mandeb shape the global economy just as profoundly as the great strategic straits of antiquity did. Closing a narrow maritime passage can transform trade, energy supplies, and military planning across entire regions. History proves that narrow sea passages have shaped the fate of empires and continue to shape the policies of states. The sixth law of geopolitics is simple. Control of maritime straits can alter the course of trade, war, and world politics. Deserts, mountains, and rivers as political institutions. For centuries, the vast Syrian desert separated kingdoms and empires more effectively than walls, fortresses, or heavily defended frontiers, shaping political borders and limiting the movement of armies across the Middle East. For generations, the Sinai protected Egypt, turning the desert into one of the state's strongest natural defenses. The vast Arabian desert protected the peninsula from invasion far more effectively than even the greatest armies ever could for ages. At times, the desert itself proved to be a stronger guardian of kingdoms than even their greatest fortresses ever built by human hands. For centuries, the Zagros Mountains divided Mesopotamia from the Iranian plateau and separated rival empires, shaping lasting frontiers. The Caucasus protected the northern frontier of the Middle East, channeling invading armies through a handful of strategic mountain passes. For centuries, countless armies crossed the passes of the Taurus Mountains, yet the mountains themselves remained the true guardians of the land, shaping frontiers, protecting kingdoms, and directing the course of history while empires rose, struggled, and faded away. Long before borders or fortresses existed, mountains had already determined the choices available to rulers, armies, and empires. The Nile enabled Egypt to become one of the ancient world's most stable, prosperous, and enduring states for millennia, sustaining its power. The Tigris and Euphrates made Mesopotamia prosperous, yet also left its open plains exposed to endless waves of invasion for centuries. History shows that rivers gave birth to states, while mountains and deserts set the enduring limits of their political and military power. The seventh law of geopolitics is simple. Deserts, mountains, and rivers shape politics as much as rulers have for centuries worldwide. Why capitals keep changing. The histories of Babylon, Susa, Persepolis, and Constantinople reveal a common truth. Capitals rise where geography makes it easier to govern vast territories, control trade routes, project military power, and connect the political, economic, and strategic heart of an empire. The map itself reveals that nearly every great capital of the region arose beside rivers, seas, strategic straits, or the crossroads of major trade routes. The Achaemenid kings chose Susa as their administrative capital because it connected the Iranian plateau, Mesopotamia, and the royal road stretching across the empire from Egypt toward India. Constantine moved the imperial capital to Constantinople, closer to its key trade routes and threatened frontiers alike. Following the Arab conquests, Baghdad became the new imperial capital. The city flourished where the Tigris, caravan routes, and the commerce of East and West naturally converged. The Ottomans transformed Constantinople into Istanbul while preserving it as their capital for the same reason. Whoever controlled the Bosporus controlled the gateway between two continents. After the Ottoman Empire collapsed, Mustafa Kemal moved the capital from Istanbul to Ankara. Deep on the Anatolian plateau, it was safer from naval pressure, strengthened control of the interior, and anchored modern Turkey. History reveals a recurring pattern. Capitals are relocated whenever the political and economic center of gravity of a state shifts to a new strategic location. Today, Jerusalem, Tehran, Riyadh, and Egypt's new administrative capital show strategy shapes capitals as much as history. Even in the digital age, capitals endure where governments best govern territory, people, and strategic communications. From Babylon to Ankara, empires and ideologies rose and fell, yet the reasons for moving capitals remained consistent through history. The eighth law of geopolitics is simple. Capitals change when the geography of governing a state changes, not when political fashions or ideologies change. Why great powers almost always lose in the long run. The Neo-Assyrian Empire, the Achaemenid Empire, Rome, the Arab Caliphate, the Ottoman Empire, and the Soviet Union all appeared invincible at the height of their power. Yet none of them preserved its supremacy forever, reminding us that even the greatest empires ultimately yield to the forces of history and geopolitics. Each victory expanded the empire but stretched frontiers, roads, armies, and rule over increasingly diverse peoples. Assyria forged the Near East's first great empire under centralized rule. Each conquest made its distant provinces harder to control. The Achaemenids bound their empire with the royal road and administration, yet even rule could not permanently overcome vast distances. Alexander built his empire in just a few years. After his death, it quickly split into smaller kingdoms, each easier to govern alone. For centuries, Rome ruled the Mediterranean, but defending the Rhine, Danube, Syria, and North Africa exhausted its economy and army. Even Byzantium, which survived the fall of the Western Roman Empire, gradually lost its provinces. The Balkans, Syria, Egypt, and Anatolia became permanent battlegrounds, forcing its military to defend ever longer frontiers with steadily diminishing resources. History repeated itself. After the Arab conquests, the Caliphate rose fast, then split into states as rule became harder. Ottoman expansion made rule ever costlier as provincial needs diverged across its domains, turning imperial size into a strategic burden. The same pattern appeared in the 20th century. The Soviet Union became too costly to sustain as a unified state and eventually collapsed. Assyria, Persia, Rome, Byzantium, the Caliphate, Ottomans, and the USSR faced truth. Vast spaces outlast every empire trying to rule them. The ninth law: great powers rarely fall in one battle. They decline when imperial costs exceed their political and military capacity. Can this geopolitical cycle be broken? Throughout history, many states have sought to change their destiny. Some built new capitals, others created powerful fleets, while still others carved roads and canals through the landscape. All shared the same ambition: to overcome the limitations imposed by geography. The Phoenicians lacked vast lands or rich resources, yet turned the sea into their greatest strategic advantage, linking distant coasts. After 1453, Europe sought new routes to India. The Age of Discovery reshaped trade, yet the Middle East stayed vital in global geopolitics. In the 19th century, the Suez Canal reshaped global trade, making the Eastern Mediterranean even more vital for commerce and strategy. Israel's history shows that a small state can transform its strategic position through innovation, strong institutions, and adaptability. Singapore, far from the Middle East, proves that control of major sea lanes can outweigh size and resources, creating global influence. For decades, the Gulf states have used their energy resources to build modern cities, world-class ports, advanced industries, and international transportation hubs. In doing so, they gradually transformed a natural advantage into lasting economic and technological strength. History teaches that nations prosper by exploiting geography's strengths while steadily compensating for its natural limits over time. After World War II, Europe turned old front lines into economic cooperation. Geography stayed, institutions evolved, and shared interests grew. Middle East history shows one rule: geography sets limits and opportunities. States choose conflict or lasting cooperation across ages. The 11th law: geography cannot be abolished, only transformed. States turning limits into strategic advantages shape history. The 11th law: geography endures. States that turn its limits into strategic advantages shape history instead of merely adapting. The future of Middle Eastern geopolitics. In the past, armies fought for caravan routes. Later, they competed for maritime trade and oil. Today, strategic rivalry centers on energy networks, transport corridors, digital infrastructure, undersea cables, and routes linking global markets. The Silk Road once linked east and west. Today, railways, sea lanes, energy corridors, and trade routes take its place worldwide. The Suez Canal transformed global trade. Today, the Eastern Mediterranean, Hormuz and Bab el-Mandeb shape world strategy and commerce. History shows states rarely create new routes by chance. They follow geographic corridors that shape trade and power for centuries. For millennia, the Nile, Tigris, and Euphrates shaped the Middle East. Today, water again drives security and politics across the region. Ancient power rested on caravan routes and ports. Today, gas fields, energy grids, and submarine cables shape power globally. The Phoenicians, Greeks, Romans, Arabs, Ottomans, and the British Empire all sought to dominate the region's sea lanes. Today, new regional and global powers continue to compete for control of those very same maritime spaces. Middle East history reveals one constant: technologies, armies, and economies change, but geopolitical arenas endure across centuries. From Alexander to Suez, great powers pursued one goal: control key trade corridors. Today they still guard them with new tools. Israel, the Gulf states, and Turkey show that geography can outweigh limited resources in building geopolitical power alone. From Achaemenids to today's Middle East, geography rarely dictates policy, but it always defines its ultimate limits. As long as Bosporus, Suez, Hormuz, Levant, Caucasus, and Mesopotamia endure, Middle East geopolitics will endure unchanged. The geopolitical laws of the Middle East: past, present, and future. For over 3,000 years, states and empires have risen and fallen across the Middle East. Assyria, Babylon, Persia, Rome, Byzantium, the Arab Caliphate, the Ottoman Empire, and modern states replaced one another, yet the region remained a geopolitical arena. Empires changed, but rivers, straits, mountain passes, and trade routes still shaped regional politics across every era. This is why Middle Eastern history seems to change empires, while its geopolitical logic remains constant across centuries. History reveals the region follows recurring geopolitical patterns, not random wars, across civilizations and eras through time. The Middle East shows geopolitical laws intertwine. Geography drives trade, trade shapes power, politics reshape civilizations. Some states became empires. Others remained buffers as geography, resources, institutions, and strategy shaped fate. Every era introduced new technologies, armies, and governments, yet each still had to adapt to the same rivers, deserts, seas, strategic straits, and mountain passes that have shaped the region for thousands of years today. Geopolitics reveals enduring patterns for wiser, long-term, and more sustainable state decisions rather than predicting the future. Middle East history shows geography sets limits, but people and states choose the course history takes through their choices. Understanding geopolitical patterns helps governments, societies, and individuals recognize long-term forces behind conflicts. No documentary can fully cover 3,000 years. Each era, war, state, and leader has or will receive its own film in this series. Empires fall, borders shift, rivers, mountains, and straits endure, shaping the Middle East's future. Geography outlives all.